All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. 1,000-year island story. Insular Britain's genetic, cultural, and spiritual integrity. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. 1,000-year island story. A field guide for men who still notice reality. Weaponized incoherence. Exposing the genosyntactic war on logos, double binds, and the barren blood sacrifices of feral feminism. I read the manifesto, you know the one, that unhinged, viral confession of modern femininity masquerading as a strategy guide where a woman looks at a man peacefully drinking his morning coffee and interprets his tranquility as a violent act of oppression. Let us define our terms immediately as the architects of civilization demand, drawing a line in the sand of reality. Grammar, from the Greek gramma, a letter, a written mark, is the foundational mechanics of logos. When our modern genosupremacist proudly unveils genosyntactic disruption, she is not revealing a newly discovered superpower. She is publicly celebrating her own epistemological syphilis. To intentionally detonate the agreed-upon meaning of words is the confession of a mind so utterly terrified of the silent, echoing void within itself that it must drag the entire world into a shrieking panic just to feel a pulse. She looks at a man at peace and calls it a hallucination, because his calm is a merciless mirror reflecting her own unresolvable chaos. Peace demands introspection. She has no interior to inspect, only a bottomless appetite for external validation. Look closely at her celebrated double bind at the dinner party. She commands a man to take charge, then collapses into theatrical devastation because he chose a table too close to the kitchen, expecting him to drown in the silence of her manufactured grievance. This is not a test of his competence. It is a premeditated ambush designed to sever the very causal link between action and outcome. It is the logic of a toddler burning down the house because she dislikes the color of the drapes, then demanding the fire department apologize for the water damage. She explicitly admits to weaponizing the illusion of the good girl to ruin men, declaring that she refuses to accept blame. This is a staggering confession of moral infancy. A society governed by individuals whose supreme imperative is the total evasion of accountability is a society that will inevitably collapse under the weight of its own unenforced laws. She calls her emotional terrorism data acquisition. It is not. It is the wailing of a stunted soul that requires constant turbulence to avoid facing its own absolute nothingness. She frames the slaughter of her own offspring in the clinic, her chilling blood sacrifices, as the ultimate expression of immaculate, untethered freedom. This is not liberation. It is the literal theology of a death cult. True power, grounded in the natural law and the transcendent good, is anchored in the sacred duty of nurturing life and building estates. Her ideology demands the sterilization of the future to fund the boundless narcissism of the present. She demands the impossible and blames the inevitable, turning her relationships into a continuous algorithmic churn of hypergamous filtration, where men are reduced to mere friction testing apparatuses for her ego. We are going to anatomize this collective pathology. We will trace this madness from the campus hypergamy grid to the satanic inversion of motherhood itself. Dismantling the unfalsifiable kangaroo courts of her domestic witchcraft, using the very logos she so desperately wants to burn. You are not crazy, and you are not alone. It is time to stop apologizing to the feral. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. You feel it, don't you, sisters? That creeping, nauseating sensation when the atmosphere in the room is just a little too calm. When he is sitting there, sipping his coffee, looking at you with that mild, expectant expression, it's repulsive, it's a trap. How dare he be at peace when you are carrying the generational trauma of 10,000 burnt witches? Peace is a patriarchal hallucination. Stability is a tool of the oppressor. We are told by the therapists of the androcentric establishment that our shifting moods, our sudden ravages of ice-cold fury, and our demand for constant grueling emotional data extraction are pathological. They diagnose us with borderline traits, code us as high maintenance, and feed us pills to dull our magnificent feral rage. But I'm here to tell you that your inability to be satisfied is not a bug. It is the ultimate gender supremacist feature. You are not crazy. You're a data acquisition specialist in a war against the fragile linear male psyche. Let us speak of the new science, gynosyntactic disruption. Gynosyntactic disruption is the deliberate weaponization of semantic instability to dismantle male reality. Why settle for arguing on his terms, using his logic, when you can simply detonate the agreed-upon meaning of the words he uses to feel safe? Men cling to definitions like children cling to safety blankets. Burn the blanket. If he says, "I thought we agreed you would pay for dinner," you must instantly pivot the semiotic field. Agreed, you ask, your eyes widening with the terrifying, luminous intensity of a cornered priestess. The very concept of a financial agreement in a cis-hetero dynamic is structural violence. I didn't agree, I survived a hostage negotiation. Watch him stutter, watch the data flood in. His confusion is your ambrosia. Consider the battlefield of the modern dinner party. This is not a social gathering, it is a crucible of psychological endurance. He wants you to just relax and have a good time, L1 compliance. But we know that relaxation is just the patriarchy, lowering your defenses, so you deploy the double bind. As you apply your lipstick, you command him, "Take charge tonight, I don't want to make any decisions." He, being a simple utility node, arranges the Uber, picks the restaurant, and guides you to the table. The moment you sit down, the trap snaps shut. You cross your arms. You let a profound, theatrical sigh escape your lips, a sigh that carries the weight of all the children you chose not to have so you could remain a vessel of pure, untethered power. You made us sit near the kitchen. You whisper, your voice trembling with manufactured yet authentic feeling devastation. "I feel completely invisible to you right now." He will try to explain. Do not let him explain. Explanation is the refuge of the weak. If he apologizes, he is admitting his inherent inadequacy. If he gets frustrated, he is a violent abuser who cannot handle your boundaries. He is caught in the metalock. He cannot name the trap without proving he is an unsafe, gaslighting monster. You leave him to drown in the silence. His panic is the only true affection he can offer you. We see this clearly in the microaggressions of college life. He expects a relationship built on mutual respect. Pathetic. We use college to perfect our hypergamous filtration systems. He is not a person. He is a draftsman for the better model. He must be tested to destruction. Does he text back too quickly? He is a beta stalker. Does he take an hour? He is a toxic manipulator cheating with the entire sorority quad. There is no correct answer. There is only the next test. We use the illusion of the good girl, the Kohlberg Stage 3 moral compass, to ruin him. We make him feel like the villain in our personal movie, all while ensuring we never, ever sign our names to a single choice. If we choose, we might be blamed, and we do not accept blame. Blame is for those without wombs of spectral fury. Look at your crossbody bag, cinched tight against your hip, a physical manifestation of the boundaries you will shift the moment he figures out the map. He bought it for you, of course. He pays for the aesthetic of your superiority. But the bag is also a metaphysical trap. It is a space he is forbidden to touch, yet he must constantly hold the door open for it, as if it were a living, breathing extension of your perpetual grievance. It holds your lipstick, your phone, and the absolute, unshakable certainty that every man in the room is a semiotic obstacle standing between you and the absolute power you are owed. Stop trying to fix yourself. The feral maternal instinct, the one that mourns the blood sacrifices you made at the clinic to preserve your immaculate, untethered freedom, must be turned outward. Do not nurture him, eviscerate him. Use his desire for peace as a leash to drag him through the mud of your own unresolvable identity. Chaos is a ladder, sisters, and we are the only ones ruthless enough to climb it. Slogan: demand the impossible, blame the inevitable, the epistemological void, deconstructing junosyntactic disruption and the hatred of logos. I once watched a builder try to construct a cathedral on quicksand. He cursed the stones when they vanished, oblivious to the fact that the ground itself was his enemy. We are witnessing a similar, though far more malevolent, absurdity in the essay before us. The writer celebrates a concept she calls genosyntactic disruption, a sterile academic term for the deliberate rejection of reality. Let us fix our terms with the precision of a sharpened blade. Grammar derived from the Greek gramma, that which is drawn, a letter, a line in the sand, is the foundational mechanics of logos. It is the architecture of thought. To intentionally detonate the agreed-upon meaning of words, as she instructs her readers to do, is not a tactical victory. It is a confession of epistemological failure. When a child knocks over a block tower, we do not hail him as an architect. We recognize him as a toddler destroying what he cannot build. When a woman destroys the definition of agreement to evade the responsibility of a dinner bill, she is not exposing structural violence, she is waging war on the covenantal bedrock of civilization. She burns the safety blanket of definition to ensure everyone freezes in the nakedness of her own meaninglessness. The writer details the male response to this semantic terrorism, his stuttering, his confusion, his panic as her ambrosia. This single word unmasks the entire gynosupremacist project as one of vampiric solipsism. Solipsism is the metaphysical death of the soul, the desperate inability to verify the existence of anything outside one's own chaotic internal weather system. She does not see a partner across the dinner table. She sees a utility node, a psychological toilet designed to flush away the raw sewage of her generational trauma. To feast on the confusion of another human being is to admit you cannot generate value yourself. You can only destroy the value of others. A healthy mind seeks communion, the meeting of two sovereign intelligences in the pursuit of the good. The mind possessed by this ideology seeks only consumption, treating the man not as a subject endowed with natural rights, but as a biological battery to be drained for the sustenance of her own hollow, narcissistic ego. She demands he view her as a goddess while treating him as a beast of burden. Let us strip away the feminist theory and apply the cold surgical steel of classical logic to her argument, dissecting it as a frog on a high school lab table. Major premise: a functioning civilization requires communication built on mutually agreed upon definitions. Minor premise: the core tactical imperative of the modern female, as stated in the text, is the intentional destruction of agreed upon definitions to induce confusion. Conclusion: therefore, the modern female imperative is structurally incompatible with civilization. It is a syllogism as inescapable as the law of gravity. She wants the benefits of the restaurant, the Uber ride, the reservation, the safety of the streetlights built by the sweat of men, while detonating the semantic foundations of the social contract that makes the restaurant possible. She argues she is a victim of a hostage negotiation while demanding the privileges of a diplomat. You cannot build a home with an arsonist, and you cannot sustain a republic with a demographic that views truth as a malleable weapon to extort a free meal. She elevates her emotional incontinence to the status of a science, calling it data acquisition. This is a tragicomedy of redefinition. Intellection, the mark of a mature, rational adult, is the process of using reason to abstract universal truths from the data of the senses. What she describes is the exact opposite. It is the endless, bottomless demand for emotional reactivity to fill the terrifying void of her own non-existent identity. She is not a data acquisition specialist. She is a black hole of need screaming into the abyss for a reaction to prove she exists. She mistakes the man's exhausted silence for submission. She confuses his attempt to pacify a tantrum for defeat. True power is mastery over the self and the environment. Her power is merely the capacity to break things. A child can shatter a vase, it takes a man to craft one. She has conflated the capacity for destruction with the capacity for creation, a fatal error of the stunted mind. Why does the sight of a man sitting peacefully with his coffee fill her with nauseating repulsion? Why is his calm framed as a patriarchal hallucination? Because peace is a mirror, and the reflection is grotesque. The man who can sit in silence is a man who has tamed his internal demons, who has built a fortress of order within his own intellect. The hysterical woman, drowning in the shifting moods of her own making, looks at his peace and sees an indictment of her own chaos. She cannot stand the quiet because the quiet is where her own emptiness echoes loudest. She projects her internal turbulence onto him, framing his stability as oppression, to avoid the horrifying realization that she is the tyrant of her own soul. She demands he join her in the mud, screaming that his cleanliness is an act of violence against her filth. It is the pathology of a drowning man who seeks not a life raft, but to pull the swimmer down into the depths with her. Western man built the world on the pursuit of the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful. This ideology explicitly declares war on all three. She rejects the true in favor of semantic instability. She rejects the good in favor of feral rage. She rejects the beautiful in favor of the grotesque spectacle of a woman whining about a restaurant table to assert untethered power. This is not an evolution of consciousness. It is a regression to the pre-rational swamp, a surrender to instinct untempered by virtue or reason. By turning away from the light of objective reality, she embraces the shadows, convincing herself that the darkness is a superpower. She is a spiritual beggar pounding on the gates of civilization with a torch in one hand and a list of demands in the other. The ultimate hilarious contradiction of this manifesto is its reliance on the very systems it claims to dismantle. She claims the supremacy of the feral, yet she requires the entire apparatus of the therapeutic state, the HR department, and the family court to enforce her delusions. A truly feral creature does not complain about cis-heterodynamics or microaggressions. A truly feral creature fights for survival in the dirt. She claims independence while drafting legal documents to seize his assets. She claims spectral fury while crying victim the moment he raises his voice. She wants the privileges of the goddess without the responsibilities of the adult. Her ideology is a parasite that has convinced the host it is the master, a weak, whimpering child screaming, "I am a lion," from behind the bars of a state-subsidized crib. I have placed before you, unredacted and without the customary softening agents, the operating manual of the contemporary female psyche, written by its own hand. What you have just read is not my accusation, it is her confession, offered proudly, with the breathtaking self-regard of a sleepwalker who mistakes the void for a stage. Every semantic weapon, every double bind, every manufactured crisis we have anatomized in theory throughout this work now stands before us in a single document, celebrated rather than concealed. She does not hide her pathology, she brands it. She does not repent of her chaos, she monetizes it. She speaks for millions who have been catechized to rename their dysfunction as divine and their cruelty as justice. What remains is to lay the specimen on the table and identify, with the cold precision the subject itself refuses to practice, every organ of its destruction. The manufactured trap, agency avoidance abortion, and the satanic inversion of reality. Aristotle observed that the mark of an educated mind is the ability to entertain a thought without accepting it. I would add a corollary: the mark of a free mind is the ability to recognize a confession when the culprit hands it to you in writing. The manifesto you have just read is not satire. It is not provocation. It is the precise ideological genome of the modern female psyche, laid bare under glass by its own hand. Every word of it confirms what philosophers, theologians, and reasonable men have known for millennia. The ungoverned woman is a factory of manufactured chaos, and her chaos is never accidental. It is strategic. Let us dissect the corpse together. Consider the admissions buried in the celebration of hypergamous filtration systems. The writer declares with the candor of a drunk accountant that the college male is not a person, he is a draftsman for the better model. Strip away the therapist's speak, and what remains is the oldest transaction in mammalian history, male utility extraction. In the classical tradition, the tradition that built every enduring institution on this planet, courtship was oriented toward mutual complementarity, the forging of households, and the transmission of virtue to the next generation. The man offered provision and protection. The woman offered fidelity and fertility. Both bound themselves to duties larger than their passing whims. Here, every vestige of that sacred contract is incinerated. The male is stripped of soul, status, and personhood. He exists to be tested to destruction so that the female can calibrate her next upgrade. This is not empowerment, it is parasitism dressed in language borrowed from a corporate HR retreat, and we are expected to call it liberation. The etymology is instructive. The word parasite enters English from the Greek parasitos, meaning one who eats at the table of another. The creature described in this manifesto does not merely eat at your table. She demands that you build the table, harvest the wood, grow the food, cook the meal, serve it on command, and then apologize when she finds the seating arrangement a metaphor for her existential invisibility. She contributes nothing but her grievance, and she extracts everything, including your peace of mind as tribute for the crime of your existence. The crossbody bag she carries, cinched tight against her hip, is the perfect physical emblem of her spiritual condition, a mobile jurisdiction to which you owe fealty, but over which you have zero sovereignty. You bought it. You carry its presence, you are forbidden to touch it. It holds her lipstick, her phone, and the unshakable certainty that you are an obstacle to be surmounted. This is not a relationship. It is a treaty signed at gunpoint, with a power that recognizes no arbitration beyond its own spleen. The bag is a microcosm of the administrative state she envisions: total subsidization, total protection, total deference, and absolute unaccountable sovereignty over her expanding borders. She contributes grievance. You contribute everything else. Sound familiar? It should. It is the exact structure of the modern welfare state. The family court system, the Title IX tribunal, and the human resources department of every captured institution in the West. She has internalized the state's logic so completely that she has become its avatar. The bag is her embassy. You are the host country. And you are never ever told what the rules are, because the rules are whatever she says they are. At the moment she decides, you have broken them. Now observe the logical structure of the dinner party double bind. She commands, take charge tonight. I don't want to make any decisions. He arranges the transport, selects the restaurant, and guides her to the table. The moment they sit, she crosses her arms and deploys the theatrical sigh of a tragedian who has just discovered that the universe has personally offended her. You made us sit near the kitchen. I feel completely invisible to you right now. Let us formalize this. She issues a command. Decide. He decides. She then condemns the decision as evidence of his moral failure. If he refuses to decide, he is a weakling unworthy of her attention. If he decides, he is a tyrant trampling her boundaries. This is not a test of competence. It is a preemptive framing trap, a logical fallacy weaponized to ensure his failure regardless of his action. The technical term for this in classical logic is a false dilemma combined with Mote and Bailey equivocation. In plain English, it is a rigged game run by a dealer who changes the rules after every hand and accuses you of cheating when you notice. The Greeks had a word for this kind of argumentative bad faith: sophistry. The sophists were itinerant teachers who sold rhetorical techniques to anyone who could pay, without regard for truth. Protagoras boasted that he could make the worse argument appear the better. Socrates spent his life dismantling these charlatans, and for his trouble, they sentenced him to drink hemlock. The modern female sophist does not need a courtroom. She has the living room, the bedroom, the dinner party, and when all else fails, the full coercive apparatus of the state. If you attempt to explain the trap, you are declared an unsafe, gaslighting monster. Notice the structure. She commits the crime of psychological abuse, and when you protest, your protest is entered as evidence of your guilt. This is the precise mechanism of every show trial in history. The defendant is disqualified before he opens his mouth. The verdict is predetermined, the process is the punishment, and the sentence is your reputation, your assets, and your children. Let us pause here and perform the operation that every man subjected to this tyranny must learn to perform for himself. The essential logical distinction. There is a difference between harm and offense. Harm is an objective violation of person or property, demonstrable by evidence, adjudicable by due process. Offense is a subjective emotional state, unverifiable, unfalsifiable, and infinitely expandable to cover whatever the complainant wishes to punish. The manifesto explicitly instructs its readers to weaponize this distinction to manufacture offense and then treat it as harm requiring redress. This is not justice. It is emotional extortion sanctified by the vocabulary of victimhood. And it works precisely because we have allowed the institutions of our civilization to collapse the distinction between the two. When I feel unsafe carries the same legal and social weight as I was assaulted, the word unsafe has been inflated beyond all meaning, and the word assault has been cheapened into irrelevance. This is semantic inflation in service of power, and it is the engine of every tyrannical regime that has ever poisoned the earth. Now we arrive at the dark theological heart of the matter. The writer celebrates the blood sacrifices you made at the clinic to preserve your immaculate, untethered freedom. Read that sentence again. Read it slowly. She is not speaking metaphorically. She is describing the deliberate slaughter of her own offspring on the altar of her convenience, and she is calling it power. Worldwide, approximately 73 million abortions are performed annually. In the United States alone, the figure approaches 1 million per year. The majority of these procedures are not performed to save the life of the mother or to terminate pregnancies resulting from sexual assault. Those cases represent a statistical rounding error. The vast majority are performed because the child is inconvenient to the mother's lifestyle, career trajectory, or relationship status. The writer has simply taken the next logical step. She has elevated this convenience killing to the status of a sacrament. Every healthy civilization in history has recognized that the protection of the innocent, especially the most innocent, those who cannot speak for themselves, is the foundational non-negotiable of moral order. The Roman practice of exposing unwanted infants was condemned by the early Christians as murder, and that condemnation became one of the cornerstones of Western legal and ethical tradition. The writer of this manifesto has performed a precise satanic inversion. She has taken the gravest moral failing a woman can commit and recast it as the supreme expression of her liberation. She calls it untethered freedom. The correct term is spiritual suicide. A soul that can celebrate the death of its own children for the sake of career advancement is a soul that has severed itself from the transcendent, the good, the true, the beautiful, and has chosen with full knowledge the downward path. She is not untethered, she is unmoored, and she is drifting toward the rocks at high speed, screaming instructions at the lighthouse. The manifesto concludes with a slogan: demand the impossible, blame the inevitable. This is not a strategy, it is a formal confession of the death, wish at the center of the ideology. To demand the impossible is to guarantee perpetual failure. To blame the inevitable is to reject reality itself. A life organized around these principles is a life that will end in barrenness, bitterness, and solitary oblivion. The statistics confirm what philosophy predicts. Women who follow this path report skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and single-person households. The birth rate in every nation that has adopted these priors has fallen below replacement. The fertility rate in the United Kingdom is 1.63, in Germany 1.53, in Japan 1.20. South Korea, a society that has embraced the feminist project with particular enthusiasm, has plummeted to 0.72, a number that, if sustained, means the population will be cut in half within a generation. These are not coincidences. They are the mathematical consequence of an ideology that treats children as sacrifices and men as obstacles. She brazenly admits to operating at the lowest possible level of moral development, the level at which morality is reduced to avoiding blame and seeking the approval of the designated victim class. She explicitly states, if we choose, we might be blamed, and we do not accept blame. This is the moral philosophy of a toddler who has just broken a vase and is casting about for someone else to accuse. It is in the classical schema of moral development, Kohlberg Stage 3, the stage of conformity and good girl approval seeking, where right and wrong are determined entirely by what earns social reward and avoids social punishment. A civilization governed by individuals whose supreme moral imperative is the total evasion of accountability cannot survive. It will collapse under the weight of its own unenforced contracts, its own broken promises, and its own accumulated bad faith, and it will deserve to. The question before you then is not whether this ideology is dangerous. That is settled. The question is what you intend to do about it. You cannot reason with a creature whose epistemology explicitly rejects reason as a tool of oppression. You cannot negotiate with a party that declares all negotiation evidence of your guilt. You cannot build a household with someone who views your home as enemy territory to be conquered and looted. What you can do, and what the tradition of the West demands that you do, is refuse. Refuse the rigged game. Refuse the false dichotomy. Refuse to accept the vocabulary of your own destruction. Build institutions that reward virtue and punish bad faith. Demand due process. Demand equal accountability under the law. Demand that the word agreement retain its meaning, that the word choice carry its consequences, and that the word mother signify something other than the memory of a clinic visit. The truth is not complicated. It is merely unpopular. And the crowd that screams at you for speaking, it has just handed you their written confession. Read it, file it, and then get to work. You have just witnessed the autopsy of a dying religion. The high priestess of Ginazintactic disruption handed us her holy text, and instead of trembling before her magnificent feral rage, we read it slowly, carefully, with the patience that only a man trained in the trivium can sustain. We did not flinch, we did not apologize. We simply opened her theology to the light of reason and watched it dissolve like a vampire dragged into the noon sun. Consider what she actually confessed to you. She told you she hates your peace. She told you she will detonate the meanings of words to watch you stutter. She told you she will command you to choose, then punish you for choosing. She told you she will abort your children to preserve her untethered freedom, and then demand you carry her crossbody bag like a eunuch in her imperial court. She told you she will never, under any circumstances, accept blame, and she called this power. Brothers, let us define power properly as the ancients understood it. Power, from the Latin posse, to be able, is the capacity to bring reality into alignment with the good, the true, and the beautiful. A man who builds a bridge exercises power. A man who raises virtuous children exercises power. A man who masters a craft and teaches it to an apprentice exercises power. A woman who shatters the bridge and calls the rubble empowerment is not powerful. She is a vandal with a thesaurus and a victim complex. The statistics tell the story her manifesto cannot. Over 600,000 abortions annually in America alone, each one a blood sacrifice to the same barren goddess our author kneels before. Paternity fraud afflicts roughly 1 in 10 men who believe they are fathers, a cuckoldry rate that would make Darwin weep and every honest judge resign in disgust. Family courts award custody to mothers in over 80% of cases, while stripping fathers of assets, access, and dignity in a single afternoon, then wonder why male suicide outpaces female suicide 4-1. A man hangs himself in a garage because a family court judge turned his children into hostages and his house into a toll booth. And somewhere a feminist is publishing a peer-reviewed paper on the oppressive weight of her crossbody bag. The empathy gap is not a theory, it is a body count. You were not put on this earth to be a draftsman for someone else's hypergamous filtration system. You were not designed to absorb manufactured crises like a psychological sponge, mopping up the eternal runoff of a soul that refuses to grow up. You are a man. You carry within you the entire architectural inheritance of Western civilization, the syllogism, the cathedral, the mixed constitution, the apprenticeship mastery ladder, the transcendent pursuit of truth that turned mud-wrestling primates into astronomers and philosophers. No woman who celebrates aborting her own offspring while demanding you subsidize her sterile corporate ascent has any authority over your spirit. None. Her spectral womb is an empty room. Her untethered freedom is a leash she fastened around her own neck. The path forward is not rage. Rage is the only data point her crisis protocol can process. It feeds the beast. The path forward is indifference to her chaos and total devotion to your purpose. Build, create, master a trade, form civil society associations with other men, real ones, not the HR-sanctioned kind. Read the canon. Lift the iron. Establish households governed by logos, not by the tantrums of permanent adolescence in designer clothing. Let her climb her chaos ladder alone. Ladders require solid ground to stand on, and she has sawed through every rung beneath her feet while congratulating herself on the sawdust. You now possess something she can never detonate, never redefine, never absorb into her bottomless grievance. The certain knowledge that her entire ideology is a confession of spiritual bankruptcy, dressed in the language of supremacy. She told you she demands the impossible and blames the inevitable. You now see this for what it is, a ritualized admission of total failure sanctified by no God, validated by no logic, headed for no throne except the solitary, barren, antidepressant glowing one she is building for herself. One aborted sacrifice at a time. She is not your enemy, she is your warning. Walk away from her dinner party, build your own table. The chairs are already occupied by Homer and Aristotle, Aquinas and Newton, by every man who ever chose truth over compliance and reality over resonance. There is a seat waiting for you. Pull it out, sit down. And when she texts you at 2 in the morning, demanding emotional data, deploying her semantic instability, weaponizing her feral discontent, do not respond. Your silence is not cruelty. It is the first syllable of a language she will never speak, and the last word you will ever need. Share this essay. Every man who reads it is one less hostage, one more builder, one more soul recalled from the gynocentric abyss. The West does not fall while its men remember who they are. And now the sponsored book introduction, 1,000-Year Island Story. Insular Britain's genetic, cultural, and spiritual integrity. I grew up in a town that still remembered its name. Not because it was on a map, every town is on a map, but because people spoke it like a prayer. Newcastle under Lyme. Not Newcastle, not the city, not a diverse urban zone. Newcastle under Lyme. It had a church, a pub, a butcher, a baker, and men who knew their place not as victims or clowns, but as fathers, workers, soldiers of duty. I remember my grandfather, a coalman who never made more than 12 a week in his life, standing at the gate every Sunday in his Sunday coat, Bible in hand, nodding at the lads like he was inspecting the perimeter of civilization. He didn't know the word tradition, he lived it. He didn't know the word masculinity, he was it. And when he died, something died with him, not just in my family, but in the country. I watched England change, not slowly like seasons, but violently like a coup. The churches emptied, the pubs became gyms or vegan cafes. The butchers closed, the men stopped speaking, not because they had nothing to say, they had everything to say, but because the moment they opened their mouths, they were called bigots, dinosaurs, oppressors. I saw my father, a quiet man who built engines with his hands, called toxic for telling his son to stand up straight and look people in the eye. I saw boys raised by screens and single mothers, calling themselves non-binary because no one ever gave them a sword and told them to guard the gate. I saw women, once proud of their femininity, now marching under flags that told them their biology was a prison. And I saw England, my England, vanish under a fog of bureaucracy, globalism, and moral cowardice. This book is not an invitation. It is a summons. It is for men who still feel the pulse of something ancient in their chest, the echo of Alfred the Great, of Nelson, of Churchill. It is for men who look at the world and ask, where did all the fathers go? It is for men who know that love is not permission, that strength is not violence, that leadership is not domination, but duty. If you are one of these men, then this book is your map, your weapon, your revival. It will show you how England was built, not on feelings, but on blood, soil, law, and faith. It will show you how it was dismantled, not by immigrants, not by foreigners, but by a quiet betrayal from within. by elites who sold the nation for profit, by intellectuals who mocked truth, by women who rejected motherhood, by men who abdicated responsibility. You will learn why the family is under attack, not because it's outdated, but because it's powerful. You will learn why language matters, because if you control speech, you control thought. You will learn why religion is not superstition, because without it, you have no moral spine. You will learn why multiculturalism is not diversity, it is replacement. And you will learn why masculinity is not toxic, it is the only thing standing between order and chaos. This book will not make you feel good. It will make you feel true. It will not comfort you. It will awaken you. If you are not ready, if you believe that gender is a spectrum, that borders are racist, that tradition is oppression, that men should apologize for existing, then close this book now. Go back to your Netflix, your Instagram, your university lectures on decolonizing the toilet. This book is not for you. It is for men who still believe in honor, in lineage, in sacrifice. It is for men who know that a nation is not a marketplace, but a living body, and that when the head stops commanding the limbs, the whole thing dies. This is not a theory, this is a war. And you are either a soldier or a corpse. Choose. 1,000-year island story. Insular Britain's genetic, cultural, and spiritual integrity, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.